You know that person who, in the middle of an argument or when they're clearly hurt, just stops talking? And I don't mean in a dramatic way. They're not storming out or slamming doors. They just go quiet. Their face goes blank. They hit you with an "I'm fine" or "it's nothing." And then they retreat into themselves, like they're suddenly a million miles away, even though they're literally sitting right in front of you. Maybe that person is you. And if it is, you've probably been told your whole life that this is a problem, that you're being passive-aggressive, that you're shutting people out, that healthy communication means talking it through, always, immediately, no matter how you feel. You've probably internalized this idea that going silent makes you the villain in the story, the one who's emotionally unavailable, the one who's making everything worse by refusing to engage. But here's what nobody talks about. That split second right before you go silent. That microsecond where you can feel the words forming in your throat, the anger or hurt rising up, and then something inside you just clicks off. It's not even a conscious decision, not really. It's more like a circuit breaker that trips to prevent an overload. You can feel the heat of what you want to say, the sharpness of it, and in that tiny gap between feeling and speaking, your brain runs a calculation so fast you don't even notice it's happening. It asks, what happens if I say this right now, in this state, with this much emotion? And the answer comes back immediately, nothing good. You'll say something you don't mean, or something you do mean, but in the cruelest possible way. You'll escalate. You'll hurt them, or they'll hurt you more, or you'll reveal something vulnerable that'll be used against you later. So you shut down. You go quiet. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about what might come out of your mouth if you don't. That moment, that gap, that's you protecting everyone in the room, including yourself. And here's the thing that's going to sound controversial. Going silent when you're upset isn't a sign of emotional immaturity. It's actually a sign of profound emotional intelligence. Society has sold us this idea that the most emotionally healthy thing you can do is express everything you're feeling the moment you feel it, that suppression is always toxic, that silence is always violence. But that's not how human psychology actually works. When you go silent, you're not avoiding the problem. You're pressing pause on your fight or flight response. You're giving your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, a chance to catch up with your amygdala, which is the part that's literally screaming at you to either defend yourself or disappear. You're choosing not to weaponize your words when you know they'll do damage you can't take back. That's not weakness. That's restraint. That's wisdom. There's this concept in psychology called emotional flooding, and it was extensively studied by this researcher John Gottman, who spent decades analyzing what makes relationships succeed or fail. Emotional flooding is what happens when you're so overwhelmed by stress and negative emotion that your heart rate spikes, your ability to process information shuts down, and you literally cannot think clearly. And here's the important part. Gottman found that people who recognize when they're flooded and take a break, people who go silent and step away, actually have healthier relationships than people who force themselves to keep arguing through the flood. When you go quiet, you're not stonewalling, you're self-regulating. You're doing exactly what every therapist would tell you to do, taking space to calm your nervous system before you respond. But of course, society doesn't see it that way. We live in a culture that's obsessed with immediate reaction. Social media has trained us to believe that if you don't respond instantly, you're guilty. If you don't defend yourself in real time, you're weak. If you don't engage with every provocation, every bait, every heated moment, you must not care. We've turned communication into a performance sport where silence is interpreted as forfeit. And this is where the paradox gets interesting. The people who are constantly demanding that you talk it out right now, they're often the same people who can't handle what you'd actually say if you did. They don't want honest communication, they want immediate compliance. They want you to stay engaged in the conflict because your silence makes them uncomfortable. Your silence forces them to sit with their own feelings without getting the reaction they're fishing for. And that's unbearable for people who are used to controlling the emotional temperature of the room. So let me tell you what's really happening when you go silent. You're creating a boundary. You're saying without words, I will not participate in a conversation that's going to be destructive. You're refusing to let someone else's emotional state dictate your response. And you're protecting the relationship by not saying something in anger that you'll have to spend weeks trying to take back. Irving Goffman, this sociologist who studied human interaction like it was theater, talked about something called impression management, the way we perform different versions of ourselves depending on our audience. But here's what Goffman understood that most people miss. Sometimes the most authentic thing you can do is refuse to perform at all. When you go silent, you're dropping the mask. You're saying, I can't do this performance right now. I can't pretend I'm calm when I'm not. I can't pretend I have the words when I don't. That's not being fake. That's being honest about your limits. And let's talk about the difference between performing emotion and actually processing it. When you force yourself to keep talking during a conflict just because someone expects you to, you're not resolving anything. You're performing resolution. You're saying words to make the discomfort go away, but you're not actually working through what you feel. You're prioritizing the appearance of communication over the reality of understanding. People who go silent are often the ones who understand the difference between quantity of words and quality of meaning. They'd rather say 5 true things after they've thought about it than 50 reactive things in the heat of the moment. They value real connection over continuous noise. And in a world that mistakes volume for value, that's a radical act. Think about it this way. Would you rather have someone who yells every thought and feeling at you the second they have it, or someone who respects you enough to make sure what they say is what they actually mean? Would you rather have 100 shallow conversations or 5 deep ones? Would you rather have someone engage with you when they're flooded with cortisol and can't think straight, or would you rather they come back when they can actually hear you and be heard? The people who go silent aren't running away. They're running toward something better. They're running toward a version of the conversation where both people can actually be present, where words mean something, where resolution is possible. And here's the conclusion that's going to change how you see yourself. You haven't been failing at communication, you've been refusing to participate in bad communication. You've figured out, maybe instinctively, maybe through painful experience, that not every moment deserves a reaction, that some fights aren't worth having, that your silence is sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer because it refuses to feed the chaos. You're not the problem. You're the person who decided that your inner peace is more valuable than winning an argument. You're the person who understands that real connection doesn't happen in the heat of conflict. It happens in the calm after, when both people have remembered why they care about each other in the first place. So the next time someone accuses you of shutting down, of going cold, of refusing to engage, remember this: you're not shutting them out. You're shutting out the version of yourself that would say things you don't mean. You're protecting something precious: your integrity, your relationships, your sense of self. And that's not a weakness. That's you knowing something that most people spend their whole lives trying to learn: that silence isn't empty. It's full of thought, full of care, full of the discipline it takes to choose your words instead of letting your words choose you. You've been doing it right all along.